Pleasure you could join me. I am Pious, Kojo Backah. To our very first story. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has revealed that China has now pledged to offer the necessary financing assurance to help Ghana secure an IMF program. Now, the move is coming after China had expressed some concerns which could have impacted negatively on Ghana's program. But speaking at a news conference in Washington, D.C. last night, the finance minister noted that China's commitment could fast-track the approval of Ghana's program by the board.
I think it was a very successful meeting, acknowledgement that we have done considerably well with regard to the domestic debt exchange program, and they are now waiting on receiving all sorts of documentation to enable them give us a proposal. So I think we've started on the right foot, very collaborative, and we expect in the same way in which we engage the Paris Club, that will have an engagement that would result in the country being on a stronger footing, and they also burden sharing like all others have done. China, as you know, we visited on March 22nd, and we had excellent meetings with the finance minister, in which he was very clear that these were short-term problems that Ghana was seeing. He was very confident about our future in the medium and long term, and committed that they would work on our case to be able to give the appropriate assurances to the Paris Club. They have thus joined all of the Paris Club meetings that we have had, and we do expect them to offer these assurances in the coming weeks to the Paris Club, so that they will then submit to the fund. So I think we've actually enhanced the quality of our relationship, and we look forward to working even closer with China in the years ahead. I think the other question was a statement by David Malpass about the cost. The costs are actually quite, it's quite an expensive issue.
So that's Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta speaking at that news conference in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Kweku Kwarteng, has given the firm assurance that Ghana is on course to get an IMF program by the second quarter of this year.
It seems to me that Ghana has an easier task with the bilateral creditors, because in all these, the IMF is just waiting for a commitment, indication that indeed we're willing to help Ghana along this path.
Okay.
I doubt that is going to be difficult to get, realistically. Now, there were meetings between government and the private investors. Again, look, realistically, I just don't see how the private investors would somehow look at the situation and say we are unwilling to do anything. They will ask the usual questions. That sometimes the intention for asking those difficult questions is to ensure that once we get along and you have your program, that we will get a good deal going forward. I do not think those questions are really intended to decide whether or not they want to participate in this relief arrangement that Ghana needs in order to secure an IMF program. So I am confident that we will get a program. When are we going to get it? Is it May? Is it June? I don't even think it's very important. The finance minister, I heard today make the point that we're going to get this thing done by May.
Yeah.
I prefer to believe him. If it goes beyond that, we would see when next we can do it. For people like me, I have listened to the IMF MD in some of the public discussions here in
Kweku Kwachen speaking in that interview with Raymond Akwa on PM Express Business Edition yesterday. Now, let's get a perspective of an economist, and joining me via Zoom is Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie for his perspective on this matter. Grateful you could join us, sir, for your time here on the marketplace. Now, I would want to pick your views on the announcement made by government that China and, of course, our bilateral creditors have agreed to some extent, come to our rescue. Your initial thoughts on that?
Well, it is a welcoming news. Ghana is at the crossroad. We are at a point where we need an IMF program. And then the preconditions to secure the IMF program is to get assurance from the creditors, both external creditors and domestic creditors. And so, well, from the government, they were able to conclude about 98 billion cedi domestic debt exchange, and then they started going to the external creditors. We know we owe China about 1.7 billion, Paris Club about 1.9 billion, then other commercials, 8 billion from multilaterals. And so it is a welcoming news to get on board these creditors to give us the assurance that they are willing to help Ghana get out of the problem. But one thing that I want to believe is that we should not, underestimate the complexity and the sophistication of the creditors, both domestic and external creditors. They are all very complex and sophisticated, and therefore dealing with them is difficult to put timelines on whether you finish in May or April or June. You may have your plan as a government that you want to secure it by April, but what about the creditors? So you deal with China, and so what you are done with just 1.7 billion, and then you go to Paris Club 1.9 billion, and then you go to the other creditors, Eurobond market $13 billion, and so we should just. I'm for one. I will not, be emphatic about the time when we will get this assurance. I will not be tempted to be emphatic. I will only be hopeful that it goes through because of the uncertainties surrounding these negotiations. And the uncertainties are also driven by the complexity and the sophistication of the creditors. The reason I'm hearing that they are asking government to come back to the domestic, for a second round of the domestic debt exchange, perhaps the reason may arise from how high our domestic interest cost is. Let me run you through certain data that I have here. I'm comparing Ghana with Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Egypt. These are, you may call them our peers when it comes to debt distress positions. Sri Lanka has about 50% domestic external debt. The external debt service is about 2 times that of the domestic debt. The domestic debt service is about 2 times the external debt service. Pakistan has 67% domestic, 53% external. The domestic debt service is about 6 times that of the external debt service. Egypt has 75%, domestic versus 25% external. The debt service for domestic is 10 times that of the external. If you look at Ghana, Ghana's case is almost the upside down of what I read to you. Ghana has 46% domestic and 54% external. And so Ghana is highly exposed to the external risk, i.e. the exchange rate risk, and also the fact that we do not have much control over the external market. The government could more or less bulldozer its way through the domestic market, but for the external market, it is quite difficult. And our exposure to the external market, I've told you, is 54%. Even with the 46% domestic debt, within that, we still have external creditors who have come to buy the domestic bonds with foreign currency. So you may be tempted to deduct them from the domestic and add them to the external, and we are talking about some 60%. However, our domestic debt level is lower than the external debt level, but the domestic debt service, that's interest payment plus amortization, is 4 times that of the external. So Egypt, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, they have more domestic than external. And so it's understandable to see their domestic debt service, 2 times, 4 times, 6 times higher than the external. But Ghana's case is quite different. We have more external, less domestic, and yet the domestic debt service is about 4 times that of the external debt service. This is why, in my view, I think that they may be asking Ghana government to come back to the domestic market to have round 2, because the debt service, the debt cost from the domestic market is higher, 4 times higher than that of the external. And you don't also want to go fully on the domestic and wipe out the financial market, because recapitalization will be so expensive for the country. Again, the taxpayers will be made to pay extra taxes, buy government bonds to recapitalize the banks and then deepen the domestic financial markets. You don't also want to go 100% on the external, because if you do that, the market will be shut to you. You may not be allowed entry. Since January last year up to now, Ghana government has not been able to go to the Eurobond market to raise any funds. And mind you, as an emerging market, we need that to stabilize our domestic currency. And so all these dynamics come to play. That is why it's difficult to stick to certain timelines, because of the complexities that I've outlined to you. I'm sure going forward, other things will come out.
All right, so on that score, the finance minister is on record to have stated that there isn't going to be any second round of domestic debt exchange program here. So I think that has to be put out there. But my next question to you is that, following that comment or the plea by the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, to the creditors, basically to fast-track processes, and of course now having the commitment of China and of course other creditors as well, that look, we are ready to sit with you, you think it may or may not affect our timeline?
If anything, it may fast-track it. Like I'm saying, that on the first point that you made, that I'm happy that government is not coming for a second round from the domestic market, because all the resistance that they face at the domestic debt exchange. So it's good that they will not come for a second round. Pensioners and the insurance and bankers, maybe their funds are safe now. So on the other assurances that you talked about, yes, if anything at all, to rather fast track it and not maybe delay it. I think that there's a deliberate attempt by the IMF to support government of Ghana. In fact, maybe deliberate attempt by the other creditors. So I like that geopolitical, status that we are enjoying as a country now. That deliberate attempt, I think, is there. And I am hopeful that Ghana will go through this, secure a program, and then stabilize our economy and grow to create jobs that everybody is craving. So, yes, the announcement by the managing director give us that assurance. It's good for us to secure the assurances from the other creditors, which is a prior action for the program.
All right, so I want to connect to my colleague George Yafe at Washington, D.C. now, and kindly hold on for me so that we engage George as well on this matter. Grateful, George, you could join me on the marketplace. If you can hear me, we do know that we've been able to get the buy-in of our external creditors and what have you. Now, tell us what next.
If you can hear me, what is next is that, and just to quickly fast forward and bring you a briefing that is going on right now from the African department. Bibi Salati's argument, or what he said a few minutes ago, is that Ghana has met all the conditions. Now, the only condition that is left right now is to get the financial assurance from our creditors. And as soon as that is gotten, they are going to take Ghana's agreement or request to the board for it to be approved. So I think that what next is that the fund is just looking for an assurance that we are committed to participating in this program in terms of the financing assurance. And Ghana can now take the request to the board for us to get the program approved. Remember that what they are looking for is not sealing a deal with these external creditors. What they are just looking for is just the assurance, and they can go to the board. So what next in terms of these negotiations is that get the assurance from the Paris Club, from China, that they are committed. And from the minister's comments yesterday at the press conference, we get the understanding that China is going to be on board. We had an opportunity of getting some information from that Paris Club engagement between that China was called on board to participate in terms of the meetings. And they had initial concerns about the classification of Ghana's debts in terms of the debts owed to China. Because, for instance, some debts are owed to the China Exim Bank. Now, would you want to classify that as a state debt or a private debt? And those were some of the issues that were been lingering on. But the understanding that we got from China was that during that meeting was that, well, it looks like they will come on board this partial credit committee, and maybe that could send some good signals to Ghana in terms of getting that assurance to go to the board. And that was something that later the Minister of Finance did echo at the press conference that happened yesterday.
I'm concerned about the time limit, and of course we are time bound. So how soon are we going to get this assurance from?
I think that if you engage the IMF, they are being extremely cautious about boxing themselves into any timelines. Even before the minister spoke, and I said that we have not seen the city react badly because all those investors who matter knows what is going on in terms of when are we likely to get a program and all the rest. So unless anything changes, at least one thing for sure is that something is going to happen within the second quarter. If you do your necessary extrapolations that if the program is concluded today as in necessary conditions today, it could take us about 6 weeks for all the scrutiny to be done for it to go to the board. So second quarter, I think everyone can stick his neck on the chopping board. But as boxing ourselves so much in the dates, if we engage all these investors, if we engage the IMF off record, it looks like the May is not out of place. But just like what the African Department boss has said just a while ago, we are waiting for just that financial assurance from our creditors. As soon as we get that, they are going to the board to get Ghana's program approved.
All right, so quickly walk us through the regional economic reports being launched now.
And that is what I tried to explain to you about what he said about Ghana's program. There was also a question about, has Ghana put in place the necessary structural reforms that could get us this program? What we got from the African Department Director was that, yes, Ghana has started, but this will take about 3 to 4 years. And they are kind of convinced with those structures that Ghana is putting in place to ensure that we don't go back again. I mean, what the IMF is seeking to do is those structural reforms in terms of revenue, in terms of fiscal slippages and all the rest. And he thinks that he's convinced that Ghana is putting in place those measures that will ensure that we'll get the program and ensure that this program will bring about the needed reforms that the IMF is looking forward to.
Thank you very much, George Yafe, for your time here on the Marketplace. Comprehensive report there, George Yafe. So, Dr. Usu-Sarkodie, you are on, and I want you to pick your thoughts on what George reported, that what is left now is the assurance from our creditors.
George, this report, that if you get the creditors' assurance, then you have IMF program. Because as I've heard from him, they are not looking for some structure. They are only looking for commitment from the creditors. And so once we got that letter of commitment from them, then we are good to go. And I think I must also add my voice to the structural reforms. Why did we get to this point? Why we are so desperately in need of the IMF? Because as a country, we haven't been mobilizing our own domestic resources. We have been borrowing and borrowing and borrowing as a country. And that has brought us to this level. So if you don't want us to get to this same level situation again, then we have to reform, restructure, and discipline ourselves fiscally Let me give you some little data. Between 2006, I'm using 2006 because that was when we finished the HIPIC initiative. Our public debt to GDP ratio was just 26%. Today, we are talking about over 100%. What has happened over the 17-year period? What has happened is that the debt has increased by 9,900% within 17 years. Meanwhile, our total revenue and grant has increased by just 2,800%. So what we have done to ourselves as a country is that we have neglected the structure, which is to mobilize our own revenue, and then we can go for little support externally or from external borrowing. We have rather gone for borrowing with little support from domestic revenue mobilization. And I think that we cannot jump the gun. We cannot continue on this trajectory as a country. We have to reform, mobilize our revenue, and after mobilizing the funds, we must prudently apply them, not to waste them. If you ask the taxpayer to pay 2 percentage points in VAT, other 3 additional tax measures that have been passed by Parliament, the taxpayer is also looking at what you are going to use the money for, to serve as an incentive for them to pay. So if they see that their road is being constructed, if they see that the light is on, they see that schools are getting the necessary funding, they will pay. So let the managers of the economy also bear in mind about what they use the funds for. That is what everybody is looking at.
All right.
Now,
we are grateful, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, for your time here on the Marketplace. Let's move on to some other stories pertaining to the economy, though, and the demand for dollar has surfaced or resurfaced again, as $1 is now selling at 12 cedis in the retail market. Well, this was after a 2-week sustained improvement in value against the dollar and the other major foreign currencies.
The cedi began the week losing value despite gaining over 10 percentage points to the American greenback last week. It sold at 10 cedis 95 pesos to $1 before the Easter holidays, but has since lost about 1 cedi 5 pesos in value to the American greenback. The same story could also be said about the pound and the euro, as they are now going for 14 cedis 60 pesos and 13 cedis respectively at the Forex Bureau. Some analysts had forecast that the cedi will record a mixed performance this week as the market awaits a decision of Ghana's external debt restructuring with its bilateral creditors.
And talking about the cedi, those were your latest cedi updates. Now, let's move on to one other story that will be of great interest to you. And the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, that's COPEC, is predicting a 2% increase in price of petrol at the retail pumps. Now, COPEC says diesel prices are, however, expected to drop by about 5.58%. And we've joined via Zoom the Executive Secretary of COPEC, Duncan Amoah, for more. Duncan, grateful you could join me on the Marketplace. Quickly, tell us what is informing your prediction. Unmute for me, Duncan. Duncan, I'm asking you to tell us what is informing your prediction. It seems we don't have
our latest numbers as contained in the statement. One would.
Duncan, go on.
Yes, one gets missed effect or a missed outcome to 23, which commences in about 48 hours. What is one expecting to pay for petrol, diesel, and LPG? For petrol, you are likely to add about 2% to what you currently pay at the pumps. For diesel usage,
It seems Duncan's line isn't favoring him at all, so we shall take him out and, of course, bring him subsequently, basically on Business Live, to throw more light on their projections there. But let's do the story before we wrap up. The Ghana Revenue Authority is urging taxpayers to use the month of April to take advantage of its online portals and digital channels to file their returns. Reverend Amisha Daiwu is the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority.
This is the month of April, and this is the month that's dedicated for every taxpayer, or for that matter for every citizen, to file their taxes. I've just finished filing my tax using our taxpayers portal, and I'm therefore using the opportunity to encourage every taxpayer to go onto our taxpayers portal and make sure that he files his tax. You can also download our app either from the Apple Store or from the Google Play Store, and be able to file your tax conveniently. And I want to encourage everyone between now and the end of April, make sure that you file your tax and become tax compliant. If in extreme cases you are not able to either go onto our website and use our portal, or download the app and use the app, you can still visit our offices, and our staff will help you to be able to file. By all means, whether it is Google Play Store, whether it's Apple Store, whether it's going through our portal, by all means, file your tax.
All right, so that's it for Marketplace for today. I am Pious, Kojo Backah. Always a pleasure serving you. You can always get business stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Do have a lovely weekend.